Hello and welcome to this session number 4 on the physical actions. It's called physical actions. It's about the next stage of this series of visualization and translating it through to astral projection, lucid state, and all of this other stuff that I like to play with. So, as usual, we have two recordings going. Well, we have the YouTube recording going on, and we have Second Life going on down here. So, I'm looking between both. Let's see if I can move the laptop up so I'm likely into eyesight line. Yeah, that might work. Hang on. Should have done this earlier. Ouch. Oh, it's hot today. It's too hot for me, and I can't cope. You know, first bit of major sun, this whatever season it happens to be, and I can't cope. I need more than a swamp cooler. Anyway, okay, so it's always humid in the UK. That's the problem. And I'm right on the coast, so it's warm and it's moist. Anyway, but I say it's warm. It's probably only I don't know. I haven't actually checked the temperature outside. It was in the 20s. It was hot enough for me. Anyway, so those of you on Second Life here, this is being recorded, if you didn't quite grasp that already, for YouTube, and it'll appear on YouTube in a couple of days' time, once I've actually managed to get the editing done. Or not editing, at least strung it together and processed it into YouTube. Anyway, so, as usual, with all of this, if you have any questions, ask. You lot on Second Life, you're driving some of this, so if you've got any questions, especially some of you are new here, I don't recognise the names, so it's a bit interactive. I've got notes which I'll dish out, so you know you can read those. So I like to be interactive because you know you can read the notes, so it's no use me reciting them because you can read them perfectly well on your own. So here's a chance to ask questions and interrupt. So if you have a question, interrupt. And I will divert and try and answer that question, and then you can always read the notes and see what it was I was actually intending to talk about. So you lot on YouTube, well, bit delayed, but comment on the YouTube or message me directly through my site and we can go from there. So that's the intro all out the way. Well, perhaps not, because you know some of you here has said I don't. 3 of you I recognise. So, you know, as you can see, my AV down here is an Egyptian headdress, Egyptian costume. I'm a Kemetic. I'm also not quite practicing chaos magician, but I incorporate chaos magic within my Kemetic path. So, as usual, all of this is from my own experiences, so feel free to contradict me. Hey, that's what this is about. I don't know everything by a long way. So, good question. Where am I on YouTube? Well, obviously, if those people who are watching YouTube are already there, they have already got there. Hang on, let me get the link. Okay, someone's asking a question. Okay. You know. Okay, right, I'm just going to let them go, and wonderful. Anyway, okay, so, people asking questions. Okay, right, so, yes, so this one is on how I sort of translate visualization into a more active role of lucid state. And it sort of builds. Okay, so yes, as I say, to build on the previous sessions, primarily the first two, on setting a right meditative state. All of that sort of does translate to astral projection and so on, because you still need to have all the stuff working in your head and some of the physical aspects, but this is going to be more on some of the physical sensations and issues around those. Now, over the years, I've picked up a number of texts that I like to trot out on this. The first one is, and have I got it even handy? I know I've done this again. I keep meaning to bring this out into, I need to find it. Okay, we've got that one. And oh God, where is it? Ah, here we go. I knew I had it. I took it to my other class. Right, so there's 3 books that I like to refer to in this session, mainly because all 3 have helped. One in particular at the very start, and that was Applied Visualization by James Lynn Page. Those on YouTube, you might... And that's back to front. Okay, never mind. It's hard to get. I saw this in Treadwell's in London on the rare books shelf a couple of years ago, but I bought mine back in the early 90s. It was one of the early books I actually purchased on, well, anything to do with the occult or magic or so on. And it was, wow, that is an old book. But it's certainly been around a while, and it was a very useful book to get me started on visualization. Another one that I have more recently purchased, Journeys Out of the Body by Robert A. Monroe. Okay, so that's back to front as well, possibly. It is in my camera, so who knows. It's Robert A. Monroe, and you can easily find these ones on good bookshops or on Amazon. But the other book, which I don't actually have a physical copy of, I've only got some excerpts from bits where I've managed to find them on Google Books, because sometimes in Google Books you can look at chapters, and you know, Googling was enough to get me that information, and that was the Initiation into Hermetics by Franz Barden. And the bits that I've managed to spot, it'd be nice to get hold of a copy of the full book, but it is pretty expensive because it's not a particularly common book to get hold of. And there were some aspects that were very useful, and I'm going to come on to all of these as we go. So, just a quick question to all of you in Second Life land. Astral projection, altered state, any experiences you want to share at this stage? Because we can address some of the common things, because I'm basically going to go through some of this stuff. Issues you've had achieving a lucid state, or out of body, as sort of parapsychologists seem to go by, use the out of body state as their term. We all most I hear someone. Oh, I see. Okay, a few are typing. Okay, why those questions form, I will get going. So for me, and I'll roughly recap until I see some questions throw up. I've been experiencing, okay, dream state, yeah. I've been experiencing spontaneous astral projection since a child. It's become lenius now I've got control going. And it was a scary experience. Most people tend to have, from what when I've talked to people about this, a few of these lucid states a few times in their lives. Sometimes they don't appear to be controllable. They sort of appear in a very difficult set of circumstances, and you can never repeat them, which is the whole point of this series of sessions, is that I hope to help explain some of the methods that I've used to gain control over my own experiences. Because as I said, as a child, they are sometimes terrifying and very confusing, and you think, well, that was a one-off. Has it happened again? No. But in my case, it was happening on a regular basis, and it's very funky dreams. As you say, Nesh, it's quite common in dream state to experience a lucid state and to realise that's the case, but to oh, there was another one. We're talking about lucid state and my primary recent book. Oh, I'll grab that as well. Wreck my shelf. Astral Dynamics by Robert Bruce. This is one of my primary ones now. It's a new book. Fantastic. So yes, we're going all over the place. Here we go. This is what happens. So I can't see everybody. Where is everybody? Oh, you're all over on that side. Okay, fine. Oh, and someone's up there. Although they haven't got voice on. Fine, whatever. So, trying to gain control is a real challenge. For me, it was... Oh, and there's a... Oh, yeah, well, that's niche. Yeah, I know. Got that. Trying to gain control, or at least some kind of expected rhythm, because, you know, a spontaneous experience can lead to strange dreams and so on through the night, or disrupted sleep, and that doesn't help the situation if you need to have a decent night's sleep, for example. Over a long period of time, it can really mess up your day, fatigue and so on, if you're not getting a decent sleep. So gaining control is a useful thing to do. So what I have done, pretty much all of those stuff I mentioned in the first couple of sessions, and that it's finding ways to start off lucid if I need to have a lucid experience, because I found once I actually started to initiate a lucid experience on demand, the spontaneous stuff did sort of decay in frequency. So getting a grip is really important, because if you're firing off all over the place, that you know it's no good. You need to achieve some element of control. And if you can fix a time and day, or well, even just a time is good enough, to be honest, then getting that regular cycle in, your body is gonna think, oh well, I've had my feel of out of body experience for for the moment, we're going to get fixed another time, and that seems to work. So let's think what else. Oh, hang on, I just need my notes. Oh, I haven't done this one in a long time. And I've gone right off piste completely at the very start. So yes, okay. An aspect of altered state, and obviously when I first got into looking at altered state, it wasn't until I got this first book, visualization one, that I encountered some of these concepts that we now are going to talk about. Obviously in my childhood I was experiencing all of these things, and I was pretty much oblivious to all these technical words that people throw around, like spiritual bodies and projecting and so on. These, as far as I was concerned, I was having really vivid, fascinating experiences in my dream state that were impinging on my waking reality. So it wasn't until I started to actually properly explore the occult world that I picked up on some of these concepts, and some of the very first things were about spiritual bodies. Some of my early books that I picked up obviously were on the sort of major spiritual paths. I looked a little bit at Tantra, and a bit of Northern tradition stuff, and it was quite mixed, and ceremonial magic and all the usual crims that we seem to pick up. And okay, catch you in a bit. The spiritual body sort of was quite an integral part of most discussions on altered state and out-of-body experience. I wondered, what is this? Because, you know, I've already done at least 10 years of, well, probably not, that's 10 years is probably pushing it, several years, you know, 5 to 7 years or so. When was this? I must have been around 17, 16, 17 when I actually managed to get some decent books. So, you know, I've been exploring this in my own way for at least 5 to 7 years. And so what's this spiritual body stuff then? And they all sort of talked about, well, human body has all these various levels and this aura and aspects that make up the physical self, which is very spiritual bodies. And it's through the separation of this physical and spiritual body that allows the visitation to alternate realities, dream, and astral projection and all these other forms. Thought, okay, interesting. So what's so special? Because I've never really seen or experienced any of this before, yet I was able to do this without awareness of all this clever stuff. Well, it's not because I did it on purpose. It's because I was already doing it and I was trying my own things. So, you know, to be told, okay, that the way it's working is because I have this astral form and it's separating from the physical body and I'm going off. Okay, so what's this look like then? And, you know, some books talk about actually seeing your physical double move and separate and looking down to see your ghostly form or whatever, and no, not seen any of that. Okay, so what's going on? And a variety of different systems have different spiritual forms. And, you know, even my Kemetic path, which at that time I was starting to explore, came up with 5 different forms of spiritual body. Not that the Egyptians sort of talked about astral projection and stuff, but some of the New Age stuff sort of latched on to these concepts and decided, oh well, we'll take that and explain astral projection in terms of the Egyptian spiritual bodies, which for me just, okay, I went along with because I was just new. And I still didn't get it. And there's this other one as well that sort of came up quite frequently on some texts I was reading. I think, this was now 2 or 3 years, sort of early 90s. I was actually starting to get onto the internet, or whatever, the internet wasn't great back then, but I had access to internet resources in whatever form they were. And there were a lot of articles that people had written and that I was able to access. And frequently they would come up with this thing called the silver thread that connects you to your astral body when you're travelling. And this thread you need to protect because it connects you back to your physical body, and should that ever be severed, you'll never return home. Which was a concern because I'd been going strange places and I'd never even perceived there was one. Not for as far as I could tell. I never saw one of my own. So that sort of led me to the conclusion that if you expect to see these things, you will. I didn't expect to see them, so I didn't. Not to say that one or the other is correct or wrong. It's whatever is required for you to go about the business, I would imagine. So, spiritual bodies, if you have no idea what they are, don't care. And I still don't care. I do not sort of work along those lines. I never have, and I certainly will never probably go along that. Even though I'm sort of re-investigating my Kemetic path, I still won't think in terms of a spiritual body. It's irrelevant as far as I'm concerned. Anyone here got anything on spiritual body stuff that you may have encountered? If, of course, you've gone down that route. No, worries. It's just something that sort of irked me. Oh, what's up? Well, the thread self-made. From what I had from the various texts that I read, that the silver thread is present. But what I'm saying is, I think it is self-made. If you expect it to be there, then you will see it. Now, I can't remember, the Journeys Out of the Body, Robert Monroe does talk about the silver thread. So, I'm not sure if the talk about that existence is really based on his experiences or whether it predates his. I've not really been bothered about it, so I haven't really explored that concept. But I'm sure he does mention it in here now and again. But then I've read that some people say, well, sometimes it's so thin you can't easily see it, and it's behind you. Well, I can look over my shoulder. I'm sure I'll be able to see this very long thing disappearing into the darkness behind me. But anyway, who really? Well, the whole point is that this thread is what tethers you to your mortal body, your physical body. And think of it as a sort of, when you separate, you're creating this little tiny spring link back to your physical form, so that when you feel you want to return, and this is another aspect that I'm going to disagree with on personal experience, is that it will pull you back, or it will connect you and you can find yourself going home. Now this is, well, talking about returning, we may as well jump to that section of this. Again, my personal experiences have been that the return is instantaneous. Some of the texts, again, after I'd been experimenting and experiencing this for years, all were saying about fighting your way back to your own body, or floating, or willing your return to guide you home. And in the Monroe's book, he does go on about the having to journey home to find his body and then re-enter it. That has never been my experience. Return to my own body has been instantaneous, because again, I suspect that's down to my own expectations. I wasn't expecting I would have to fly home. I wasn't expecting that it couldn't be instantaneous, and the fact that I could just wake up. Now there is a difference between waking up on a return, a willful return, as opposed to being woken up unexpectedly. I have noticed there is actually a difference there. The return on my own will, my own requirement to return home and to wake up, is a little bit disorientating, but it's near instantaneous. It's like coming out of a deep meditation, essentially, because that's the way I go in anyway. So when I return, it's just remembering that I actually got a body and I need to be a bit woozy and head spinny kind of thing. But when it's been a return due to, say, a doorbell or a phone ringing or someone talking to me, that has been very disruptive. I wouldn't say it's like being badly drunk. It feels highly disorientating, really disorientating, very nauseous, and it's very unpleasant experience to be woken and return forcibly. As far as finding my own body, that I've never done, because I've never expected that. There was one instance early on in my professional life. Let's think, it was my first job. It was around about the age of 17. I was working in a computer shop, and I was working with a guy, the shop owner, husband was a merchant seaman, and with one leg, and he would tell me a lot of stories about the far-flung places he had been and so on. Real corny stuff, but Jim was lovely. He really was a nice guy. But he told me, and I don't know how we got onto the subject of out-of-body stuff, but he related a story that he was told in his travels of a master and a student. The student was learning astral projection from his master, but the student was a little nervous. There was some tension in the relationship, in that he wasn't sure about the motives of the teacher, that they were all honourable, and that they was being held back from something. So the story went that on one out-of-body experience task, the student went and he had left his body and was doing what his teacher was asking him to do in the astral form. And then he returned to his body to find that his master was trying to enter the body to take control of it. And it transpired that the master was seriously ill in some way, and that he was trying to gain control of this student's physical body to have a new life, so that he could transfer his life from his current decrepit form to that of the student's. You know, yeah, you know. Well, the student apparently beat the teacher back and managed to re-enter his body all okay. He then went to his teacher to have a go at him have it out with him, and found his teacher was dead. So, you know, it's hard to tell if this was a true story or not. I'd heard so many things from Jim, and that I could not tell. But it was an interesting thing in that the student was returning to his body, but the master was able to intercept and take control and possession. Now, I never knew Jim was into this kind of stuff. We'd never had that conversation. So perhaps he had heard this story. Who knows? At least there was someone to tell the story, because the student survived, so he could well have related it to someone. But, you know, it could all have been made up, it could have been a film. Who knows? So that kind of scenario does seem to echo in some of the texts that I have since read from that time that Jim told me this story. So, I don't know. I've never experienced the need to transition back, so who knows. And okay, so Nish was asking, does it affect the total recall of memories? Now, in a way, yes. I have experienced differences, and in particular, the book on astral dynamics, Robert Bruce does actually talk about two forms of memory: the actual physical memory and the astral form of memory, and that when you return, the brain's trying to join both of those sets of memories up from a physical body and a non-physical body, needs to be reintegrated. Not sure how much I believe any of that, because we're still not entirely certain how the mind actually works. So there are some aspects that I have found affects the memory recall, and the depth of meditative state going in. Now, I've talked about this, I think, in a previous one, in that because normally what I do is, if I need to go into altered state, I will seed in the desire and the imagery that I need to work with in a waking state, and then descend in a meditative state down and down until I lose the connection with my physical form, and then I'm free to push out and go. So what can happen, and it depends on time of day and so on, that if the fatigue is high enough, then I will lose control and I'll enter sleep. That's unfortunate, but my sleep is then very deep, which is, I do sleep reasonably well. It's been getting lighter as I've been getting older to achieve a deep sleep on a regular basis under normal circumstances. But I have noticed in those states my sleep is strangely deep, and that my memory on waking, I know something's happened, but I can't recall. There's also another situation that I started using as part of my Kemetic path, don't know, mid-90s perhaps, that when I go to sleep I ask or say to myself or to my goddess in general, I need a meeting of the council. Now that refers to the Aenenid, and just that phrase, and I don't know where it sort of came from, the need to do this, but it was enough to trigger an unusual set of sleep pattern, and that it again will be very deep, and again I would wake with no memory except that something as quite profound happened. That's annoying, but none of this stuff's useful if you don't have some element of recall. So personally I try to keep it relatively light, just enough so that I'm not dipping into a deeper not quite sleep cycle, but you know, when you're sleeping and you're in a meditative state, the mind is going up and down in this particular brainwave pattern. So I try to keep it above that is required for sleep. You know, sometimes I get it, sometimes I don't. So in the case of my particular method that I use now, according to Robert Bruce, it is referred to as wake-induced lucid dream. In that lucid dream I've used to try and achieve, because I heard about lucid dream for a very early stage in my experimentation, and that sort of tallied with my natural state of out-of-body experience that I've been working with since I was a child. So for me I thought, this could be the way to unlock a more controlled form of lucid dream by going through this process to learn how to enter that state. But it's really hard. I got it a couple of times, but generally failed miserably at lucid state, because you know, you go in and I could enter a really good dream state, but it's maintaining enough control to notice the cues to snap out and take control. A couple of times I might have done it, but on the whole, no use. So, but with the wake-induced lucid dream, it's another form of just deep meditation. You go in with the imagery and you sink down and you create it and you're already in there, so you don't need to go in and come back up again. It's worked for me. Other things I've seen in there, expectations again. This is another thing that has been a little bit of a confusing one for me. My experiences have been varied. I have memories that as a child I could leave my body and fly across the fields nearby, swooping like a bird, and it was wonderful. That was one type of experience. Another, I was doing a sort of tunnel journeys, you know, the usual kind of sci-fi hyperspace warp kind of stuff, and that was really quite funky, but I couldn't quite remember if there was a destination involved. Possibly I might have just been able to remember just that on waking. So I may have gone somewhere, but all I could recall was the warp effect. I do not recall ever going into a dark void, what is usually associated with as the astral plane. Perhaps that's because, again, I wasn't expecting it. So my expectations wasn't that I'd go to this complete space void and see dead people or whatever floating around. But years later, when I picked up all these books, people were saying, well, that's astral projection, you're going to the astral plane in there. Or you could select another plane and go to this place and meet these deities, or go somewhere else and do all these sort of things. I thought, okay, I've never done any of that. I've just definitely explored in the local area, flying around. Now, I find that is actually called etheric projection. Remote viewing is what, you know, the general public tend to call it, in that you leave your body, you sort of leap across the astral plane, or whatever plane you want to call it, not this reality, and then come back down into this physical reality somewhere else, but as a point of consciousness, and you're able to view that particular physical area. And now, I've did that a lot as a child, and I've been able to do that as an adult in varying degrees, and there are some good stories I can relate on that, but we're running out of time, so I probably won't. But you could read it in my book. Hey! Apart from Laid Bare, I do mention a couple of very good experiences on etheric projection that have lasted for a repeatable and lasted for a long time. So, as far as other forms of projection, as I say, I use wake-induced lucid dream. I started to make use of that in the early 90s as an alternative to evocation, and that I would create a sacred, safe place to work with my goddess. And that I created through intense visualization. I placed it in a confined space. Oh, welcome back at 10. And I don't know anything outside this bubble that this temple sacred space lives in. So I have no idea whether it's just all in my head or on a plane somewhere. No idea. Doesn't really matter. So, you know, and for that I do have total recall, because I go in shallow enough not to lose that control. Perhaps if I bothered, I might fight the control a lot better, but, you know, when you're in the moment, do you really trouble to do this stuff? You do forget it yourself sometimes. So, other issues, you know, it is not uncommon to encounter issues with this kind of stuff. When I've done talks, like I think one of the memorable ones was at Witchfest a few years ago. It might have been my first or second Witchfest talk I did. That's the real life Witchfest, not this one here in Second Life. I did a talk on altered state and astral projection, and I had quite a few talking about the point of separation and the problems. And this goes right back to sort of one of the first things I was talking about, is that some people have just this one experience in their life. If they're lucky, they have more, and if they're really lucky and work at it, they'll have lots on demand. But, you know, for some people, they have a real surreal moment and they separate from their body. And the separation is a very unusual experience. It can be so disruptive, it can cause panic. And when the panic rises, the adrenaline starts to flow and you snap out of the trance state you're in. And then you wake up and you feel bad, and that you feel then guilty that you've lost an experience that would have been a mind-blowing. And as try as you might, you could never get back into it. That is common, and I had a few people talking about this. Now, the separation, for most people, and still for me as well, follows pretty much the same kind of issue, in that it's a shift, either sideways or backwards, and I do feel I've stepped back, but and it's not my physical body is not there. It's certainly a separation. Now, that kind of fear, and I sort of can describe it similar to the experience of a roller coaster, in that when you're at the summit and you're about to plummet, your stomach sort of lifts up as if it's that weightlessness moment. It's a bit of a scary thing, and that's what drives a lot of people to break from it, because they're not expecting it. And go, it's okay, no, it's alright, the camera recording ran out of memory. Had to quickly delete something. So right, we'll see if that's got enough memory. It's not for very long. Hopefully it'll hold out. Anyway, where was I? I was oh yes, separation. So yes, it is very disorientating, and as I say, it's this sort of sudden change of unexpected sensation that can cause a break. So what I sort of worked out was a way to try and overcome this fear, because I hate roller coasters, and it sort of plays along the same lines, is that cloud watching is a good way to try and fight this sudden separation anxiety that occurs. You lie on the ground watching the clouds go past, and I'll try and get this done quickly before the camera runs out of memory again, and you just stare up at the clouds, and when you're relaxed and the mind is free, just put the hint into your memory thoughts is which way's down, and you only have to briefly just ask the question, which way's down. Instant response will be, oh, you're lying down, it's behind your back. Fine, just accept that, roll on, go back to watching the clouds, and enjoy that. Do that 2 or 3 times. Ask that question. So your mind, when that question comes up, is behind you. Great. When you feel ready to test your anxiety and to deal with the anxiety, ask the question again, but remind yourself you are on a globe and you're stuck to the globe due to gravity. So down is possibly behind you, but there's actually nothing underneath your feet. And that, are you actually down through your feet? Now, hopefully, that sudden realization that actually your feet isn't on the ground pulling you down, in fact that you're lying down and there is nothing under your feet, you may feel a sliding effect as you realize, oh, actually I could slide, because this could raise the anxiety and have much the same effect. Now, if you can overcome that fear, then should you start to experience separation in a lucid state or in dream state, then you may be more accepting that this isn't unusual. Your perspectives will change. I'm possibly going to run out of memory. I think it's flickering again. Okay, so thank you all for coming. If you have any questions, you know where I am. I am easy to find. This should be up on YouTube possibly tomorrow, I would hope, at that channel there. Let me get the note cards. As usual, there's also PDFs on my website because the note card formatting is rubbish. Let me get previous sessions, so anybody who's not been before, feel free to bin them should you already have them. I need to add that normally this session is every 2 weeks, but I'm not here in 2 weeks because I'm going to be at the Staffordshire Pagan Conference doing my talk on Kemetic Reconstructionism. So it will be 4 weeks before I'm back with the next one, and I think that's one on amulets, visualised amulets, which is something I love, especially as a Kemetist. So, as usual, anytime, I could well be at Jen's class here at Witch's Brew tomorrow. So, Healing Circle's a week on Wednesday, so, you know, I'll see you around. As you, just throw questions, I don't care. Just ask, talk to me, it's always good to talk. So, thank you for coming along, for you lot watching on YouTube. Until next time, bye bye.